Hello viewers from wherever you're watching us from around the world. You're watching QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we are broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. My name is Aliou Cisse. It is time for a weekly State of Affairs program here on QTV, and it's good to be back after being away for almost 2 weeks, but we are glad to be back. Well, there is a growing fear and anger in Niger, after the ECOWAS operator of heads of state and government threatened military intervention to restore constitutional order following the overthrow of the democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum by the people who were tasked to protect him, led by Abdurrahman Chiani. Well, it is the fourth coup in West Africa, all in former French colonies, Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Niger. Well, joining me this week to discuss to continue the discussion on this crisis and the decision taken by the ECOWAS Authority of State and Government, I have in the studio Mr. Banka Mane, a prominent activist. Mr. Mane, good to have you on the program.
Thank you, glad to be here.
And also joining us via video link from Monrovia, Liberia, is Senator Edwin Melvin Snow Jr., who is a member of the Liberia's delegation to the ECOWAS Parliament. He also doubles as the chairman of the ECOWAS Parliament's Committee on Political Affairs, Peace, Security, and African Peer Review Mechanism. Honorable Snow, good to have you on the program.
Ali, it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Well, to start with, both of you, what do you make of the junta's reason for taking over? Honorable Snow, you can. Yes, I'm asking, what do you make of the junta's reason for actually taking over in Niger?
Well, Ali, the junta, the reason for taking over in Niger is still not clearly defined. Like you rightly said, the person who was responsible to protect the life of the president is the one who is deposing the president. And that doesn't speak well at all. He has not given the world any clear reason why he has overthrown the government. And that is why we in ECOWAS are condemning this and calling for the restoration of constitutional.
Yeah, but they've mentioned the issue of the security reason in Niger. Isn't that enough?
Well, Ali, you know, the coup in Guinea, for example, we're all aware that President Conte tampered with the constitution, had a third term, allegedly rigged the election, and was declared president. The coup in Mali, we know that the president tried to tamper with the parliamentary election result, which led to the coup in Mali. Burkina Faso came with the same excuse that there was security concern and there was not much support for the security. Niger has come up with the same flimsy reason, which is not giving any justifiable reason for the coup. This is a man that was responsible to protect the life of the president. He now comes out and said that the president was not doing much for security, so his solution is to overthrow the president. How do you justify that? What is changing? There has been no previous demonstration in Niger. There has been no popular uprising in Niger. The president won a democratically elected government with a huge mandate, and the person who is responsible to protect his life is coming up now to say, we don't want you. It doesn't speak well of Niger. It doesn't speak well of the coup leader.
It doesn't speak well of Niger. That's Honorable Senator Snow Jr. in Liberia. And let me now bring in my studio guest here, Banka Mane, a prominent activist. What do you make of the reasons given by the junta to take over? Just your own perspectives.
Well, like you said, they gave the lack of security reasons and the government's lack of support or help in making sure that they deal with the security threats that are in the country. And I think the other reason that they floated around were issues of corruption and stuff like that. But just like the Honorable Senator said over there, these kinds of flimsy reasons, I call them flimsy because there are avenues for addressing such issues. It's not, I mean, anytime you are not happy with how the president, does things, you just pick up arms and overthrow him. I mean, you don't just overthrow like that. So there are not good enough reasons to justify a military coup. In fact, generally there are very, very few reasons to justify such an action. So again, I totally agree with him. I think these are reasons that just don't fly, and personally, I have a serious problem with it. So that any army anywhere can just sit there and decide, well, the president is corrupt, so we're going to get rid of him. Or they have avenues to deal with these things. It's not like there are various serious human rights violations taking place where the president is killing people, torturing people, and committing genocide or committing crimes against humanity. Things of that nature where you can say, hey, there is some sense of urgency here. Where the army must act to protect civilian lives and properties. But this is not the case here, where what you technically have is people just who came up with a reason to do what they did. And the reason is not good enough, and I think it shouldn't be good enough for anybody. For that matter. But
Senator, let me come back to you. You talk about, the reasons given by the military is not justifiable, but we have seen, thousands, almost like 30,000 people gather at the stadium, to show their support and solidarity with the military.
Don't forget, this is a democratic government. It's a democratic system. There are oppositions in the country. He contested an election, he won with 50-something%. So definitely his government will have opposition. And sometimes, as you know, most of our young people nowadays, they survive on chaos, So when there's uprising, people did the same thing in Guinea. People are in the street celebrating. Today they are calling now for the government to return to constitutional rule. So sometimes we just celebrate anything and everything. That doesn't make it right. You will always find people to celebrate the wrong thing. You will always celebrate. You will always have deviance in society. That doesn't make it right. And my brother in studio that stated, where the landmark? What happened? Has there been, torture, political prisoners? Has there been crackdown on freedom of press in Niger? What gave room to what they did? There's no justification. They will always find They always find a way to justify their action, but that doesn't suffice, with best practices.
And Banker, to you, seeing that huge crowd at the stadiums, showing their support.
Coups always sort of orchestrate this euphoria. If you look around, you will see always, but people always live to regret it. Even in the case of the Gambia, I remember when Jammeh and his cohorts took over, there was a certain sense of euphoria. People were excited.
Especially at the McCarthy Square.
Exactly. So that doesn't really mean much. And sometimes even the coupists are the ones who orchestrate some of these mass of support to show legitimacy in the sense that they are saying, hey, we have broad support, because coups tend to be like that. They don't have legal legitimacy, but they have no legal basis. But people do seek legitimacy through these kinds of means where they are saying, hey, we have total control of the country, and in fact, by the way, we have popular support. And then in international community, as far as they are concerned, those seem to be the sort of the yardstick for whether they should just accept the coup for what it is, that this is a popular uprising, if you will. When in fact it's orchestrated by a few people. So that doesn't mean much. And I think when the dust settles down, when the curtains are drawn and reality sets in, you will begin to, people realize what actually has taken place. And after reflecting, that is, they will come to terms with reality. And that is, look, this is a whole new system. These people rule by decree. And you cannot speak out, you cannot do this, you cannot do that. Some of the things that you used to accuse the former president of, all of a sudden you realize you don't even have any of those rights whatsoever anymore by virtue of even laws, because these people are ruling by decree. They have suspended the constitution. They have done the, I mean, things that you used to take for granted. All of a sudden you are totally denied these things. That reality is at some point going to set in, and I'm sure they would not be excited about it after that.
Honorable Senator, at the beginning I mentioned this is the fourth coup in West Africa or in French colonies. Like I said, we have Guinea, Mali, Burkina Faso, and now Niger. I mean, you were in Abuja for the second extraordinary summit convened by President Tinubu, who is the current chair of the authority. But people are asking, I mean, what is the stake? I mean, previous coup d'etats, we only see sanctions. What is the stake now with this addition to, to deploy the military intervention in Niger?
Well, ECOWAS has to wake up to reality. The issue of coup in our region is becoming embarrassing. The successful coup in Guinea, successful coup in Mali, successful coup in Niger now. Successful coup in Burkina Faso, and then now a coup in Niger. Then you also had a coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau. There's one camp that just come up in Sierra Leone.
Yeah.
And I think the Gambia also has similar. Now, all of the reasons for the different coups and attempted coups are different. The reason we're not asking for the coups in the Francophone nations is that what are their colonial masters? What are they doing about the situation? Because you have coups, the next thing the French flag is burned, then the Russian flag is up. Mm-hmm. Is there a message to the colonial master? Is there something we need to discuss? Is this an ECOWAS problem? Don't forget, we condemned the coup in Niger, but every time you see a photo of the coup leader, there's an ECOWAS flag behind him. But the French flag is being burned. So do we need to go back to the drawing table to understand what is the situation with the Francophone countries and the colonial master?
Yeah, and in one of your interviews, you said, I mean, the coups in Francophone West Africa is a protest against French negative colonial legacy.
I believe that. I stand corrected, but I believe that. There's a lot of things we need to discuss. For example, Niger is ranked as one of the poorest nations in the world. But the natural resources that generate 1/3 of the electricity it finds, including the Alpha Tower, comes from Niger. So Niger buys electricity from Nigeria.
Yes, and Banka,
what's the issue?
Exactly. Banka, let me now bring you here. I mean, what are the possible implications of the coup in Niger as we speak, and of course the possible military intervention as threatened already by ECOWAS?
Well, the possible military implication there is the security threat it poses for other countries in Africa, especially, like he said, Francophone Africa. West Africa, that is. Because the problem with these kinds of things is it's infectious. It's almost like a trend, and a pattern is beginning to develop. Or in fact, it has developed already. If you have these countries, I mean, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, I can go through the list. Then there is a pattern that has developed already, and that is not a good pattern. And that's why it's important that ECOWAS puts its foot on the ground and say, no, we cannot let this continue. And because if the Niger one is allowed to pass, with kind of the flimsy reasons given, because I think he raised some very interesting points there, which has to do with the sort of these rebellion against the French, if we will, which is understandable. The French legacy, or even the legacy of colonialism in general in Africa, has not been a good legacy. And so for people in general to really be incensed by that whole notion and trying to do something about it and making sure that we kind of break ourselves away from that colonial hold, I think that's a very legitimate fight. that Africans in general must fight to make sure that we gain our sovereignty and our full independence as it's supposed to be. However, that's not the trend that we are seeing here, unfortunately. What you are basically seeing here is people disassociating themselves, saying they are disassociating themselves from one colonial master, and then basically falling into the trap of another colonial master. So, I mean, this idea that somehow the French are the bad guys, the Russians are the good guys, so you trade the French for the Russians, we should not be puppets of anyone, not Russia, not the West. What we should do is to seek our independence, total independence, our total sovereignty, and think for ourselves, act on our own basis and our own interests. But this idea that you are getting rid of the French and then you embrace the Russians, so now you are fighting for Russian interests, what kind of process, what kind of idea is that? This is what is so problematic with this whole process. So ECOWAS should stand up and put its foot on the ground and say, no, 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 no. And I think that's essentially what is happening here, because if ECOWAS allows this one to pass, I'm telling you, the implication, as you asked earlier, will be that other countries will be, other army generals or, state guards in other countries will be inspired by this and saying, well, if Niger can pull it off without any consequences, what are we waiting for? We've been on this road before, if I may land there, Sise. And that is, this is nothing new. This kind of trend, coup after coup after coup throughout Africa, we have seen this movie before. From the days of independence, when Nkrumah and all these people were being kicked out all over the place. We've seen it happen over and over again, and it's not a good legacy. All it did was we basically, like I said, traded one for another. We were not with the West, now we were with the Soviet Union. Back in those days, it was the Cold War. And what did we gain for it? Nothing. All we did was, all we had was dead bodies all over Africa and wars after wars and nothing to show for it. We must get out of this mentality, this idea that the West is the bad guy, so let's go and associate ourselves with this one. Total independence means we think for ourselves, act for ourselves. Whatever we do is based on our own interests, strictly how we see it as the basis for our actions. Not because we are seeking to get Russia on our side or this one on our side, or that because this idea that Russian flags are flying and the French flag is being burned. To me, that's like what we say in Mandinka, trading Larankan Sumna for Sumnala for Larankambula. It doesn't make any sense. This is just insane, and I think we should stay away from this kind of trajectory.
Let me now bring in Honorable Senator here. I mean, you have heard from my guest in the studio. I mean, do you agree with him that ECOWAS has reached at a point where it must act or it lost its credibility?
ECOWAS must act. I fully agree with him. But I also agree that this is not solely an ECOWAS problem.
Okay.
Don't forget, the Francophone countries, for example, all of the foreign reserve is in the French central bank. The protocols, all of the major treaties, protocols, is in allegiance to the French system. So we need to study. It's something that we need to address, and not just the ECOWAS. We're concerned in the region. We're very concerned in the region. But is that the issue? We need to look at it. We need to split it. And like my brother in studio just said, it's a competition now. You got Russia, you got China on one side, you got the US, you got the Europeans on the other side. How do we balance it? Are we prepared to continue to be puppets to the West? Or are we prepared to steer our own course in Africa?
And aside from the external factors, let's now look at the internal factors. I mean, most of these countries, people complain about bad governance, which as a result, we have seen high cost of living, high unemployment rate. We have also seen some, what we'll say, constitutional coup d'etat, where incumbent presidents will change the constitution just to favor them to go for third term. Are in these all issues that could also be used to justify any sort of military takeover in the sub-region?
I will condemn any form of military takeover, but I also will condemn any attempt by any government to ambush the constitution or to perpetuate itself in power. you know, democracy should give you a term to serve. You cannot say you're running a democracy, but you have no term limit. Then it's a different form of democracy. And that's why countries and leaders that are seeking third term in order to shortchange the constitution, ambush the constitution, or to change the constitution overnight, it's wrong. I believe that in the democratic system, you have 2 terms and allow another citizen of your country to pick up from there. Now, these are some of the recipes for the problems we have in the region. And that's why I started with Guinea. I had a show with you before in the studio.
Exactly.
And we talked about Guinea. Yeah. We condemned the coup in Guinea, but there were justifications for the coup in Guinea. So we should discourage, and I'm very happy my president is the champion of discouraging third term.
That's George Weah.
I don't think any leader, yes, George Weah, I don't think any leader should seek third term from the people. You go and serve 2 terms. If you are elected for a second term, you serve the second term. After your second term, you leave. But to shortchange your constitution and bring in all the technicalities and legalities to perpetuate your sovereign power, these are some of the recipes for coup d'etat, and that's why we should discourage it.
And are you saying, such can be used to justify any coup? Like you said, constitutional coup d'etat, some of these governments, like people will say, it's government of the few, for the few, and by the few?
There could be coup by military action, and there could also be coup by ambushing your constitution. And both are wrong. If it's government for the people, by the people, well, there's not only one member in the political party.
Yeah.
Look at Nigeria. President Buhari ran 2 successful terms. He walked away, but Nigeria continued by the same APC.
Yeah.
So the former ruling party is still the ruling party today. So are you telling me in the government or in the party, there's only one person there that could be the standard bearer or the president? Look, Aliyu, we should never encourage any leader in a democratic system to serve for more than 2 terms. It's wrong. It's wrong.
Let me now bring in Banka here. Coup d'etats. Is there any reason? Like I mentioned earlier on the issue of youth unemployment, actually violating the constitution, changing it just to serve a 3rd term. And like I said, some of these governments are just there for few. Do you think there's any reason, tangible reason for any coup?
No, there is no, coups in that situation are not still justified.
Okay.
You see, let's look at what is happening here. Let's zero in on it. What you have is let's even talk about presidents who try to manipulate the constitution and stay in power. Yeah. Still disgusting, and I think the citizens must do everything to make sure that they deal with it. However, military action should not be part of those actions. Why? Because at least this one is trying to manipulate the constitution. This one is going to suspend the constitution. And it's not like we haven't had this experiment before. We have. Africa's problem started, I would say intensified with coup d'etats. Coup after coup after coup after coup. And some of these coups were justified in so many different ways that if you really want to talk about it in those terms. But really looking back now, will those countries have accepted and gone through those coups? Probably they wouldn't have. Because the reason for that is military is not the solution. If you are offering a solution on the table that is going to do away with those bastardization of the constitution and doing, those kind of disgusting actions by leaders, our leaders to stay in power, yes, I get that. But replacing that person with the military is the option that is that the only option we have on the table, and is that the one we should embrace? When we have embraced those options before, and it got us nothing but destruction and underdevelopment and just literally nothing. If you go back and you look at all the military coups that took place in Africa, all of them took place because of people claim corruption, people claim overstaying power. The same issues that we are talking about today. Yeah. Let's talk about even Gambia, make it more relevant, exactly. Bring the issue home. Yeah, Jammeh and President Jawara. When he took over, what did he say? He stayed in power for 30 years. He overstayed. And then also he said what? Corruption, rampant corruption, flamboyant lifestyle, I can go through a list. Well, it sounded genuine because Jawara, yes, was in power for 30 years. But we replaced him with who? A military guy, Yahya Jammeh. What do we have to show for that? Nothing but dead bodies, mess, a disaster, a country that's been pushed back. Because before the coup, before Yahya Jammeh took over in 1994, Gambia's trajectory was not the best, but it was a peaceful, stable country where investors started coming in. Our economy is starting to look good. We had re-export trade. We had a lot of things going on. In fact, countries like Senegal were looking up to us for inspiration. But guess what? Now we are looking up to those countries. They are far ahead of us. Why? Because of the Yahya Jammeh coup. So at the end of the day, did we make progress because of it? Or has it pushed us back? Now, if you want to bring about change, it should be one that should leap you forward, not one that's going to push you backwards. Military option to get rid of these leaders, it always takes us back. It doesn't help us to progress. This is my problem with it. It's not the solution. And it seems every time we run into these situations, it is the option we embrace and legitimize it and make it sound like it's a viable option. And it is not a viable option.
Like you said, I mean, the military is not a solution. But I mean, let me just take you back. In 2014, you were involved in a failed coup against the former president. I mean, under what circumstances did you actually...
That's a very good question, and that's it. That's
justifiable, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, what these military systems do is they bring about a system and a process in place that is literally that pushes people to the brink. It puts them where they have to literally fight back because all they know is weapons, killing, torture, destruction, you name it. And under those conditions, the people must act. They must do something. In our case, that's not what is happening here. In Jawara's case, it wasn't like he was killing and torturing and creating all this disaster for the country. No, there was corruption, and I agree. We could deal with those things. But at the end of the day, if you have a situation where a person comes in who is killing and torturing and disappearing and raping and all these horrible, horrible abuses that were happening under Jammeh, you could understand where even the military will step in and say, no, to save human lives, to take care of our people, to protect our people, we must act. It's like having a rapist come into your house and start raping your children and killing some and doing all kinds of stuff. You don't sit there and wait for the law to act. You deal with that the way you need to. If that means grabbing a weapon and dealing with it, you will do that. This was our situation with Jammeh. It's not like some common criminal on the street that you just pick up a gun and go after him, which is what technically is happening here under the military system.
That's Bankamane, a prominent activist. Well, viewers, you're watching QTV's State of Affairs here on QTV. We are broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. My name is Ali Osise, and my guest this week, like I said, Bankamane, prominent activist, and also Senator Edwin Melvin Snow Jr., who is joining us via video link from Monrovia. We'll go with a short break, and when we return, discussion continues. Do stay tuned.
Technology has always been at the forefront of our lives, and the way we use it has evolved drastically over the years. With the advent of 5G internet, we are entering a new era of technological innovation that promises to transform the way we live, work, and play. 5G internet is capable of providing data speeds up to 100 times faster than 4G, making it the ideal solution for streaming high-quality videos, playing online games, and downloading large files on the go. 5G internet is already transforming cities across the globe, powering smart cities, self-driving cars, and virtual reality experiences that were once thought impossible. 5G internet is also paving the way for Internet of Things, allowing for seamless connectivity between devices and the creation of a truly connected world. For the first time in the Gambia, QCell is bringing tomorrow's technology to you today with the launch of QCell 5G internet. Get ready to experience the out-of-this-world wonders of QCell's 5G internet. For more information, call 111. QCell. We innovate, others follow.
Hello, viewers. Welcome back from that short break. You're watching QTV State of Affairs. I am Aliou Cisse, your host, and this week we are still continuing the discussion as the ECOWAS Authority of Office of State and Government have threatened to use military force to restore constitutional order in Niger, where the democratically elected president Mohamed Bazoum was overthrown by the junta, led by Abdraman Chiani. My guest, Banka Mane, prominent activist, and Senator Edwin Melvin Snow Jr., who's joining us via video link from Monrovia in Liberia. He's also the chair of the ECOWAS Parliament's Committee on Peace, Political Affairs, Security, and African Peer Review Mechanism. Senator, let me now bring you in here. The same question that I put to Banka in the studio here. In what circumstances are coup d'etats actually justifiable?
No, I'm not at all.
Okay.
You cannot justify coup d'etat. You can also, however, you can discuss reasons that will lead to coup d'etat.
Yeah.
Now, if there's anarchy, massive corruption, crack down the press, just basic things for your citizenry, it could lead to coup d'etat. Is it justifiable? No. If the government is not doing well, you go for election, you vote them out. So I wouldn't say there's a justification for coup d'etat, but there are times where government gave rise to coup d'etat.
Such as? Because earlier on you said in the case of Guinea, if I get you right, you said it was justified because what Condé did with the constitution then. And now you are saying no, it's justifiable.
No, it was condemned, but what Condé did in Guinea was wrong.
Okay.
It was wrong. You change the constitution, you rig the election, try to perpetuate yourself in power, and the discouraging part about what Condé did in Guinea was Condé had the same situation when he was in the opposition, and he fought against it, became president, and then repeated what he fought against as opposition. The same problem in Cote d'Ivoire. President Ouattara is well respected, yes, but he changed his constitution and served a third term. It's wrong. It's wrong. And that's why we're now commending President Macky Sall, who have announced that he will not seek a third term, but we're now hoping that he will create a political playing field, a level political playing field, and not crack down on the opposition.
But you talk about, what happened in Cote d'Ivoire under Ouattara, who changed the constitution to run for a third term. You talk about the issue of Senegal. In the sub-region, the signs are always there, but it's like ECOWAS only act when things are out of hand. They only react. Like in the case of what is happening in Senegal right now, what is ECOWAS doing about it?
No, it's wrong. It's wrong. I was on an ECOWAS mission to Guinea. When we were rejected by President Conte, we slept in the airport and returned to Abuja.
Yeah.
He rejected us. Now, ECOWAS cannot go in there and say, oh no, we will speak against it. In Cote d'Ivoire, we've had missions in Cote d'Ivoire. We spoke about it. The citizens said, well, they had a constitution, we had a referendum. We disagree with it. But again, the end of the day, that's what happened. So ECOWAS cannot go in your country and run your system, but we will speak the truth to power and we say what is wrong. And that's why, like in the Gambia, we're now talking about third term. We are criticizing it. When there was attempt or there was something going towards that direction in Senegal, we spoke against it. We criticized it. And right now, Senegal president has announced that he's not taking a third term, but we are not still comfortable with the way that the opposition has been treated. So we want a level playing field for the opposition in Senegal. So we cannot encourage our leaders to arm twist the citizens, ambush the constitution because they want to remain in power. It's wrong. It's wrong. And sorry, we could be close to some of the leaders that are doing it, but this is not about how close we are. It's about the will of the people.
So is this about principles? I mean, the justification for coup, is it about principles here, or is it just about what you would think, okay, there's a good reason for coup? Because in the absence of a principle against, okay, a principle opposition to coup, then it provides that room for people just to stake a coup and say, okay, we have a justifiable reason for staging a coup because this is circumstances.
You know, the definition for coup is a violent takeover of a constitution or a regime, or But let's also now see people that are ambushing their constitution. Should we also consider that as coup? In the old days when we had coup in our region, there were gunfires, people got killed, people went to prison. Now in Guinea, they went quietly on a Sunday afternoon and told President Conte no longer the president. In Burkina Faso, on a Monday afternoon, they went and told the president, we are in charge, you're no longer the president. In Niger, July 26th morning, there were uncomfortable situation around the president, and the next thing he saw was that his chief bodyguard, who should be protecting him, was telling him, the chair you are sitting in, Mr. President, is my chair. So there have been different styles now of coup d'etats in our region. But let's also decide that we should call a spade a spade. Presidents that are seeking third term are also creating a room for coup, and we should discourage it.
Mr. Banka, do you agree with him on the?
I agree with him, with the Honorable Senator, on principle, but I don't like the prescription he's offering, because it tends to, you see, we have to be very careful when we discuss this coup issue as it relates to the third term bid by the presidents around Africa, around West Africa especially. The fact of the matter is, the moment you discuss them in the same forum, then you are saying in so many ways to the military, hey, we don't agree with your method, we don't like it, in fact we'll condemn it and all that, but this one here too, his way he's behaving, if he do it, it's because because of his behavior. And that's all the military need, a cover, to say, well, we did this because A, B, C, D, and there shouldn't be any because there should not be any justification for it whatsoever. Now, this third term bid and this overstaying power and issues of that nature, I totally agree with him in principle, and that is, ECOWAS especially must take the lead on this and put its foot down, just like it's doing with Niger. And that is saying, look, we're going to put in place mechanisms to make sure that nobody goes beyond, because they say this third term thing is a new trend. It was not, this is a new idea. It's not anything that has been around for a long, long time. No, it's very recent, a few years ago, that people literally started saying, look, nobody should serve more than 2 terms. So what ECOWAS must do is, it must really concretize these ideas or these aspirations into some kind of an actionable item and put in place rules and laws and whatever you call it to make sure that anybody among that leadership who wants to stay for more than 2 terms, that is something kicks in. Maybe it will trigger sanctions, it will trigger this, it will trigger that, it will trigger that, and some support for opposition parties, and even facilitating their ability to come together, coalesce to deal with the issue. There are a lot of different ways to deal with these things, politically, and even succeed at it. Now, sometimes what tends to happen with us also is that coups are sometimes a very lazy way of dealing with national problems. Instead of people, literally opposition parties, coalescing and doing the things that they need to do to really deal with a threat like a third term, they wouldn't do that. So a lot of times there is this rancor among them, there is this competition and push and pull among them, and even the selfish actions by them, that they don't really do the things that they're supposed to do to deal with this issue. So when they fail, guess what? Everybody turns to the military, like wink, wink, Hey, if you want to do something, we are here, we are waiting, hoping that when the military takes over, that creates an opening for the opposition. And it doesn't. The military is not an option. Because once they come in with a whole different agenda, with a whole different set of rules, in fact, far worse than the constitutional manipulations we were talking about. These people who come and commit some serious crimes. Coups succeed based on experts, their own opinion on this. I'm not an expert, I don't know anything. But coups succeed mainly because of fear of bloodshed. People don't want bloodshed. So a lot of times, that's why it takes a small unit of the army or just a presidential guard to just take over. The moment you take charge of the presidency, the seat of power, you have taken over.
I know some of the viewers will be saying, oh, Banker is here contradicting himself. In 2014, I mean, he took arm to...
Well, I mean, we were under a different circumstance.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's why what I was mentioning about. Yeah. Anytime...
But you said it is never an option.
No, when I say it's never an option, that is provided you have a democratic political process in place where people can, those avenues, that's why I even talked about those avenues that are available to parties. But when you have a leader that is out there literally committing some of those heinous human rights abuses, where time is literally running out for so many people, the next day you don't know who is going to die and who is going to leave, then there is some sense of urgency there to deal with that kind of mess. That's kind of brutal dictatorship, because that, again, this is not like a political process anymore. It is a brutal dictatorship that needs to be nipped in the bud. That's the situation that we had under Jammeh. Now, under Jawara or even under Barrow or any of these other leaders, you could disagree with them as far as this or that and that and that. And in other words, those ones, you cannot justify a military takeover under those circumstances. This thing that happened even in Guinea and all these other places, I get it. Let's condemn constitutional manipulations. Let's deal with it. ECOWAS must take a harder stand, and let's see how together we can literally address these things so that those leaders get out of power the most legitimate way they need to. But sit here and justify or sort of give some legitimacy to military takeover because of those actions, we are simply saying, look, this is terrible, but military action somehow is okay. And when the military takes over, we can get into the Jammeh situation where people end up with no option but to go to war and start using violence to deal with that problem. Okay. And that's far worse.
Exactly. Let me now bring in Honorable Senator here. You talk about the issue of the third term. I want to find out from you, is this something that national governments will decide, or it is for ECOWAS to impose on West African countries?
You know, I like what my brother in studio just said. You know, sanctions, suspending diplomatic ties. I think these are things that we should encourage for presidents that are seeking third term. And let the record reflect that in no way do I support coup. I'm just saying to you is that those actions that are causing the military to launch the coup, we should also discourage those actions. No justification for coup d'etat, no justification for trying to ambush your constitution and perpetuate yourself in power.
And for you, Banker, regarding the term limits, who should decide? Is it the national governments or ECOWAS will impose it? Like we have seen in Central Africa recently, I mean, they went to referendum and voted to remove the term limit.
Both. I think ECOWAS must take the lead on this, because national governments, what tends to happen is politicians are doing what is in, whatever their selfish interests most of the time. So ECOWAS must take the lead. If they are going to start to intervene militarily,
what about national sovereignty? What about national sovereignty?
No, that's a matter of international law. Okay. I mean, then we can get into the international law aspect of it to see whether the issue of sovereignty, the legality of, for instance, ECOWAS going into Niger. That's something. Do they need UN Security Council resolution consent? I mean, these are things that could be discussed under international law to really look at what the legal basis is there for such action. But what I am saying is that if there is a legal basis for such action, and ECOWAS wants to be able to nip these issues in the bud, like he is rightly saying, ECOWAS must also take a hard stand against leaders who want to perpetuate themselves in power and start taking a harder stand and saying, no, you know what, we are not going to also allow people who want to manipulate the constitution or want to stay in power for this long or for that long come up with a framework and a mechanism to actually deal with that problem. That way, you see, when ECOWAS takes such a stand and it's not just bluffing, but it's really serious about it. Because again, political will is always a problem with ECOWAS. It's like, that's why I'm excited about this Niger situation, because they don't want to look like a toothless bulldog anymore, which is good. They need to take a harder stand against such coups. But at the same time, like I said, and he alluded to also, ECOWAS must come up with a framework to discourage the self-perpetuation in power, and make sure that they deal with these undercurrents that people or militaries can use as an excuse or pretext for an action that is illegal, and at the same time, most of the time, the intention itself even is criminal in many cases. Because, when military takes over, after a while, you really begin to understand that the one that we said was the horrible whatever leader because he was staying in power for a little too long, you realize it was, made Jawara look like a saint. Yeah. That's basically what it was.
Let me now bring in a Honorable Senator here. I mean, we're talking about the issue of the military intervention now. Have we exhausted all diplomatic channels towards ending this crisis in Niger?
No, not at all. The matter of fact, just on Saturday at the plenary of the ECOWAS Parliament, Speaker constituted a committee to visit Niger and see how we can engage the junta and the citizens. Privileged to have been one of those in that committee. Your sister from the Gambia, Fatimata Inda, also one of the members of that committee.
Yeah.
So we are now working on modality how we can go into Niger. Okay. I'm aware that the military, the chiefs of staff will be meeting in Ghana on Wednesday to also discuss the TOR for the ECOWAS standby force. I'm also aware that the junta in Niger has not agreed for ECOWAS to mediate dialogue, through ECOWAS. So we are having though slow, but we are having some progress going on in Niger. And we are hopeful that this problem will be resolved.
And like you said, during the extraordinary session by the ECOWAS Parliament, I mean, the second deputy speaker, if I'm right, from Niger, I mean, mentioned about the hardship that the people are going through there. I mean, he even called that the sanctions should be limited to the junta. As we speak, the people of Niger are suffering because the border is closed, to Nigeria, power is cut. What's your take on this?
I support the stand of the authorities of head of state and of ECOWAS. Okay. I think we need to be hard on Niger. We need to really take at this time so that we're not seen as toothless bulldog. And I think the necessary action that will discourage the junta from remaining in power or keeping the president hostage should be brought to bear so that the necessary preventive measures will be taken.
Like you said, we know the diplomatic channel is still open. I mean, they are still negotiating. I mean, like you said, the junta has now agreed to dialogue with ECOWAS after meeting religious leaders from the northern side of Nigeria. I want to find out from you, in the event of a military intervention, is there any chances of a successful intervention?
I believe there will be. I know right now the coup leader is under a lot of pressure from outside the region, from Russia. I know that he's under pressure from his counterpart in Mali and Burkina Faso and maybe Guinea. But I'm sure that reason will be brought to bear so that the political stalemate in Niger will be resolved.
And
Banka, what's the risk of the military intervention in Niger?
I don't think there'll be any military intervention.
Oh, okay.
I think what ECOWAS is doing is to show resolve. That is to show the military junta that they are deadly serious and that they are not going to let this one pass. To do that, ECOWAS must really, bring its muscle to bear and really start acting like they are deadly serious about this. And with that, you will begin to see the military junta also kind of soften up a little bit and allow for some kind of a room to negotiate so that I believe they'll find some resolution, some middle ground. Where maybe they'll come up with a transitional time period, and then that kind of thing. But I don't think there'll be military action.
And now looking at the demands of ECOWAS, I mean, they're saying the military intervention is the last resort. I mean, they're calling for the reinstatement of President Bazoum. And now the junta is not showing any sign of compromise. I mean, they have already, appointed a government.
Yeah. No, look, bringing the old president
so must
back.
ECOWAS change his demand or what?
Everybody must adjust their demands a little bit. But when these kinds of negotiations, everybody starts from the most extreme end. So that it's like wahale at the market. When you ask somebody for a price of something in the Gambia, they give you sometimes twice the price of it, actual price of it. And so that when you negotiate, you fall somewhere in between there. That's what's happening here. ECOWAS must take a very extreme position. The junta is taking a very extreme position. That's why even the junta wouldn't meet ECOWAS, Abdul Salami Babouakar, when he went there, because that was their way of saying, we don't even want to talk to you. So, but with this, I think both sides will find a common ground where it might be a national unity government or something along those lines.
And to you, Senator, what's your take on this?
I think the military option will be the last. I don't believe we'll have military intervention, but I know that there will be threatening of sanctions, additional sanctions if need be. There will be additional action against the government, the asset free, the freezer of the assets, travel ban, and other restrictions that will be imposed on them, so that to ensure that they return to constitutional. But I think the issue of firing a gun in Niger would be the very last on the table.
Yeah, but I mean, from what you have said, I mean, it appears if there's to be a compromise between the ECOWAS and the junta, then ECOWAS must adjust on the demands that they have made, because the junta has already appointed a government, appointed a prime minister, led by a former finance minister, showing no sign that they're ready to back down.
They can undo that. They will be made to undo that.
Do you agree with him?
Well, I mean, bring Bazoum back is going to be a tall order. Okay. Because getting the military to completely back down and let the president come back and take over, that also has its own implications. If the president comes back, eventually he's these guys, everybody who participated in this thing was in it, will pay some price. And so these military guys are not going to expose themselves to that kind of a prospect. So some room has to be there for everybody to feel safe and not to expose themselves to reprisal or things of that nature. So what I think essentially could potentially happen here is that ECOWAS, military, will eventually sit down, and then they will carve out a way of maybe having, like I said, a unity government, where Bazoum and these guys will be there, the military guys will be there, and then they will go for elections again at some point to really have a new government in. These are the kinds of things that could potentially happen. I think everybody is going to do everything that they must do to avoid a military confrontation, because that has far greater implication and far greater consequences, not just for Niger, but for all the countries around. But ECOWAS, at the same time, must, because inaction is far greater than, this is a case of necessity. Inaction is far greater than action. I mean, in terms of the risks. If they don't do anything about this and let it slide, then you are allowing for more and more coups to take place. By standing up and saying no, because you have to remember, this standby force that we are talking about, the whole, it's not new. In fact, it's part of the bigger Africa standby force idea. But ECOWAS one was set up in December 2022 to deal with literally coup d'etats and counterterrorism. So, it's a new thing, but ECOWAS did it so that they make sure they stop the trend of coups happening. And in this case, they must stand up, firm, and deal with it.
Exactly. We're running out of time. Senator, I understand we're running out of time, but finally, what will be your final message as far as the issue of Niger is concerned?
Well, the issue of Niger, again, is catch-22. We need to sit with the French, meet with the Francophone countries should meet with the colonial master, and have a frank conversation on the way forward. The military will have to relinquish power and return Niger to a constitutional rule. And what my brother just said about repressor, I believe that those are some of the negotiations we're going to have in Niger. I mean, if Bazoum is brought back to power or there's a return to the constitution, we have to be able to grant them clemency or get them involved into the government process. Don't forget the coup leader was the chief bodyguard, for lack of better words, for the president. And as the president was planning to retire him, to honorably retire him, he staged a coup against the president. So was the coup because of his upcoming retirement, or it was because of corruption or other influence? That's a question we all are left to answer.
Thank you very much, Senator Edwin Melvin Suno Jr., who is a member of the Liberia's delegate to the ECOWAS Parliament, who also doubles as the chairman of the ECOWAS Parliament's Committee on Peace, Political Affairs, Security, and African Peer Review Mechanism. By the way, he's also part of the ECOWAS Parliament's Mediation Committee deployed by the Parliament to visit Niger, to further find a lasting resolution to the crisis in Niger. Honorable Senator, thank you so much for coming on this State of Affairs program, and we quite appreciate your time. Ali, it's always a pleasure interacting with you. And loving people of Gambia. Thank you so much. And Mr. Bankamane, it was a pleasure having you on the program as well.
Always a pleasure.
Well, viewers, with that, we bring an end to this week's edition of the State of Affairs program. I was your host, Aliou Cisse. Do join us next week. Until then, bye-bye.